This is an outstanding panel. Like, it really is. Like, the different roles and the problems that are being solved by the folks that are sitting in front of you right now, like, these are ubiquitous problems. Like, these are the problems that everybody's talking about right now. So, I mean, this is really just an incredible panel, and I'm so thankful to have everybody here. But I'm going to start with Brett, and if we could just kind of go down and everybody just give just a quick, kind of just sort of an intro, who you are, what your role is, and kind of what you're doing with Cortex.
Hi, my name's Brett. I work at Docker. I run the platform engineering group there. Basically, our job is just to make sure that our developers are happy, be able to do their job and not worry about some of the stuff that we can take care of for them. So that's my job. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Pragya. I work for Paxos. It's a fintech company based out of New York. I'm the engineering manager for our developer experience team at Paxos. Our focus area is improving the developer productivity and making sure the developer experience is great. Some of the focus areas that my team owns is build platform, deployment platform, developer portal, tooling, and local dev environment. I'm really thrilled to be here. Cortex is something that we absolutely love and have been using for driving a lot of change within the company. So I'm thrilled to be here and learn more about it from the industry experts. So thank you for having me.
I'm Nick Braciopi. I'm the SRE manager at Earnin. We're kind of a fintech company based out of Palo Alto. And my team's responsible for Cortex, Datadog, observability, and just using Cortex to kind of up-level how services go out into production.
Hi, I'm Chris Robertson. So currently at Zscaler, though I will be talking tonight more about the work I did at Life360, where I oversaw kind of the entire backend cloud operations. And we rolled out Cortex there after a multi-year journey looking at Scorecards and various other tools for that.
Hi, I'm Victoria Manchester, SRE manager for Checker, which is a background check and HR software company based here in San Francisco, actually. And yeah, my team is responsible for observability, alerting, incident management, and developer experience. And we've been using Cortex and have really been enjoying it, mostly to get better clarity for our developers, clarity into the problems that they're solving and the problems that they face, as well as like giving them the clarity on what we expect from them and driving adoption.
Awesome, thank you. So, like I said, really, really great panel. So, really excited to hear some of these answers today. So, just really quick, scorecards kind of the first time that I became aware of them was in the DevOps Playbook. If anybody's had read that book before, but it's basically a way of taking data that you have in terms of in an integrated system and gamifying that data. It's a way of saying, okay, if I can move these metrics to this level, right, and that level is often scorecarded like gold, silver, bronze type of thing, then that means that we've achieved, XYZ quality goal or some other type of goal. So really, it solves humans' problems, right? It's appealing to the gamification sense that we know is conducive to productivity, and it's something that's baked into Cortex as kind of a first-class feature of the tool. So that's what we're talking about today, is how this particular pattern has been used to drive software development initiatives and initiatives around continuous improvement and software quality. It's a really cool approach, and actually one of the things that brought me to Cortex just a few months ago is just how powerful this feature can be for teams. So we're going to have two types of questions in this panel. Sort of an open question where panelists are going to, sort of answer sort of within their own time frame and context. Not everyone has to answer. Don't feel like you have to chime in, or if you're just like, I agree with what this person says, like that's fine. And then we'll have another type of question where each of the panelists will answer in sort of more of a fast answer kind of format, right? But for this one, this is an open question, and I'm going to leave the mic so y'all can just kind of pass it as is convenient. I want to hear how y'all converged on scorecarding, right? It doesn't just happen where teams are like, oh, we have a productivity issue, let's go get scorecards, right? Like 20 things happen in the middle to kind of get to that point. And so I'd love to hear from anybody who'd like to start, just kind of how did you find scorecarding? What was it that you were going through that took you in that direction?
I can start because I have the mic. But yeah, really for us, it started with this conversation around production readiness, what it meant to be production ready, how we could check if services were production ready, and kind of thinking about how we could do that in an automated fashion. And then when we started looking into scorecarding, we realized it would also solve a bunch of our other issues, especially driving initiatives across different teams. We have a lot of like asks of fix this security flaw or upgrade to this new version, and it's really hard to get teams excited about doing that. And so the gamification was really exciting to us, as well as the ability to drive clarity for developers.
I can go. I think we were on a similar journey. Each team was kind of on their own path of trying to get production readiness and get out there. Due to like incidents and whatnot that were coming up, we didn't have a good like judgment of like what the quality of all the services are out there. So we wanted to use scorecards to kind of get a good idea of what we have out in the land, and then there's a benefit of using a draft scorecards to be able to see like what a service would kind of come up with if we developed a set of rules, like what it would look like out in the wild. So yeah, it's interesting.
So our journey did not start with converging on scorecarding. Our journey started with everything that we were seeing, the problems at the company was pointing to having the need for a centralized source of truth, which is the internal developer portal. And just not having a service catalog, not having standardization across different teams. So every discussion led to internal developer portal. So that's where we started looking at doing an extensive vendor evaluation. We looked at a lot of different products, Cortex, ops level, Rodi, and then one of the key features that stood out for us was scorecarding. We realized that not only will it help us codify our standards, but it'll also help us drive adoption and change using the scorecards. So that's how we converged on scorecarding, and we really like the feature that Cortex provides with this. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. I think a few people mentioned production readiness and things like that, production standards. One area that we've seen this be really interesting for us, and Docker's been working on SOC 2 compliance the last few years and getting that stuff figured out. We have a whole security engineering team now, which is great. They're trying to figure out with a limited number of people on that team, how do we go out and tell people what we expect from them and help them figure out what to do without having to be really hands-on. And so for them especially, scorecards is a very easy way to show people what the standards are and show them how they measure up to that. So that's been really useful.
So I mean, production readiness standards. Oh, go for it, Chris.
Yeah. I should just grab the mic as it went past. Yeah, so
It's okay. We're
we
keeping it
actually
casual.
came at it from, I think, a pretty fundamentally different place, which was an information asymmetry between the teams and a lot of cultural things that were starting to happen, which we started getting subtext and conversations of, you idiot, why aren't you doing the things you're supposed to be doing? And on the other side of the same conversation, you idiot, why didn't you tell me the things that you expected me to go do? And so it's like, okay, hang on, like no one's idiots here, everybody's trying to do good things, but we have a clear break of expectations, and I think you're talking about a Docker. Like the security team was involved on our side, the SRE team with the production readiness checklist, but it was really, we had originally spreadsheets that were like, okay, hey, if we're going to do a scorecard, this is what it is. Oh heck, we're not doing this in spreadsheets, right? So, trying to figure that out. It was really that information, cultural, people thing, and it was just the definition of good that we're trying to document.
I love hearing it put that way, like asymmetry, right? I mean, that's perfect because it's not like people have no clue and then some clue, right? It's kind of like variances of these things. So we're hearing like problems with ownership, we're hearing problems with aligning on readiness standards, right? But a lot of which is solved by just pulling data into the same place and letting people read from the same system is kind of what I'm hearing. So you answered a couple of these, or heard spreadsheets and stuff, but maybe get a little bit more specific. Again, another open question. What were some of the things you tried before scorecarding, and what kind of results did you see with those?
I guess I will start since I have the mic this time. So we did all the traditional things like, hey, so we have this information asymmetry problem. Let's get everybody in a room. All right, let's document it better. All those traditional things that lasted until people left the room. All right, and it kind of kept going down that journey to find a scorecarding tool that actually worked.
Yeah, we tried a whole bunch of different things. Like for production readiness specifically, we had checklists in our Confluence docs. We had checklists in the merge templates, and we tried a bunch of different stuff for that, as well as especially with driving initiatives and trying to drive change. We tried opening tickets in people's backlogs. We tried generating merge requests. We tried putting time on their calendars, and it was bad.
So before scorecarding, before I talk about this, I just want to say we are in a transitional phase right now. We have settled on using scorecarding for driving our initiatives and OKRs, but we are not 100% there yet. We are still working within our teams, within engineering, to drive enablement, to drive adoption, so that engineering will look at scorecarding and drive initiatives. We have done all the traditional techniques, top-down alignment, bottom-up contribution, Excel sheets, Jira tickets. OKRs are hard. They are not easy. We change processes every quarter to figure out the best way to do that. And we do see a lot of gaps with those processes. And that's how we think scorecarding will come into picture. When I say talk about some of the gaps that we see, lack of alignment, top-down contribution is great, but that does not really translate to ownership with a lot of individual teams. There's lack of adaptability a lot of times. There is siloed thinking. So we settled on scorecarding to drive initiatives, OKRs, for a lot of these reasons, because we think scorecard will give us answers to all of these problems that we're seeing.
And yeah, but our experience is pretty similar. Notion, documents, and meetings, and everything else. All these other things that people have gone through. The one thing I want to add is I think those processes were only ever as good as the people who were enforcing them, and that's never consistent. People are busy. People change jobs, and so they were always like half starts, and nothing was ever fully done. And so I think that's one of the promises of scorecards is that it doesn't rely on a specific person to be there. Like, you wrote the scorecard, as long as that scorecard is still relevant, all the teams are getting that information. It doesn't require some person to go out and talk to them and schedule the meetings and everything else. So that's the benefit I see there.
Other thoughts?
I mean, I tried literally everything that all they have tried about scorecards. We also used to rely a lot on like just monitoring. We tried SLOs as well to try and like see if that could help kind of streamline what we need. But yeah, ultimately, scorecards is what sold me on like the idea of what Cortex to them being the better solution out in the field. So like the idea of being able to create them, being able to kind of score against them, and then hopefully being able to potentially maybe gate deploys off of a scorecard score.
And that's the theme too that's super interesting, right? Where like people kind of like mid-step, right? Where it's like we have all these great plans, we do all these great things, and now we have to risk business velocity. Oh, wait a minute, I was with you. So that's were you about to say something about that?
No,
Victoria? Oh, just kind of.
yeah.
No, that's so it's like yeah, we do all these great things, and then there's that bit of activation that's actually a difficult push. That seems to be a pattern that we hear. So, any other thoughts on that one? Okay, so this will be a fast answer, so everyone will weigh in on this one. So, what made scorecards the right choice? You know, I mean, if you could sum it up pretty quickly, what is it that's working here that wasn't working otherwise?
For me, yeah, that's the mic. Definitely kind of what I touched on before, just the gating deploys was kind of what worked for, or what I saw in the future for scorecards, and being able to gate based on quality and reliability.
Perfect. And you pass down towards Chris, and I got one over here, and we'll just.
Yeah, so the reason we went with scorecards was it was a clean abstraction that allowed everybody on both sides of the discussion to have a consistent definition point for it.
Yeah, I think similar for us. It was the clarity for teams into what the expectations are for them, something that's automated so we can scale with it, and also something that's very granular but also can be rolled up into a higher level to score. Those are kind of the main big three things.
Yeah, going back to the previous discussion, I think it's entirely about the consistency and the fact that it's always there, and it's something that people can do themselves, that self-service aspect of it too, and not having to, there doesn't have to be someone whose job is to go and tell people like you're not complying with these standards that were written in this Notion document you can't find. So consistency.
Yeah, similar to what I said before, scorecarding basically helps us provide a holistic framework for goal setting. It helps us codify the standards that we have established and helps us track the performance of the teams and update automatically based on those standards. So just helps create alignment.
Thanks, everybody. Okay, well, how far along are you in the scorecarding practice? And then specifically, who in the company is responsible for building the scorecards, and why was that decision made? Why was that the right role?
I guess, again, I can start because I have the mic. We're still pretty new in our scorecarding journey. We have scorecards defined. We're using them to drive adoption and to drive initiatives, but we're only like a month or two in. So still pretty early. We build them, so we have multiple different teams building them. I think we kind of think about it as any team who's building a platform will build scorecards. So we have like an observability platform, we have an alerting platform, we have infrastructure platform. So it's our security teams, our infrastructure teams, our SRE teams, platform engineering teams, and they're building scorecards based off of their expertise so that for our developers, product developers, they still have the one-stop shop to see all of the expectations, which is Cortex, but each team can configure, what's needed for them.
So at Life 360, it's broken down in a couple of different domains. So we've got a team that maintains some of the core scorecards, like everybody's using these. You have your domain experts, security, SRE, they're writing scorecards. But the other thing we actually did there is we revamped our architectural teams, architectural committees. Architectural standards don't exist until there's a scorecard and a measurement that goes with that scorecard. And each of those architectural groups is also responsible for maintaining the scorecards and the tags that go with each of the components. And that's cloud, mobile, web, whatever it might be. So it's, kind of, and then engineering operations as well for like engineering velocity type measurements.
Yeah, at Earnin, we're a few months also into our scorecard process. Similarly, we have kind of domain experience, like we have security scorecards, operational maturity, production readiness, essentially scorecards. My team, the SRE team, kind of handles the base scorecards for like operational maturity, like make sure you have PagerDuty teams set up, make sure you have a Slack channel defined, run books, and all that stuff. And then we work pretty closely with security and the other teams to kind of define their scorecards as well.
So similar to a lot of what you guys said, basically we have ownership of some of the core scorecards. So we started the internal developer portal with the implementation of DORA scorecards in place. That was very important for us to drive change and to drive initiatives across the teams. Then we partner with the security infosec team to drive security scorecards. We partner with our core libraries and framework team for service standard scorecards. Some of the other scorecards that we're looking at, we're trying to build like a wall of shame so we can drive more adoption. Is just recently we started an idea where we are building a flakes tracking scorecard. So if a certain team is causing more flakes, then that's they go on the wall of shame there. So we partner with these teams to actually build out these scorecards. Teams are interested when it drives changes for them. So yeah, we are not too far along in the journey, but building it out as we go.
Public shaming is a long and rich tradition.
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar here. I think the interesting question here is who builds the scorecards and why. And I think platform is a pretty new concept at Docker. We've only had specifically platform named teams in the last year or so. And so those teams are starting to figure out how they relate to their users and what standards they should be setting. And so I hope all the platform teams would be having scorecards instead of just like our core platform teams, our cloud platform and our front end platform, and those folks. So I hope to see expansion in that. I think that would tell us that it's really working really well and it's working for people. Yes.
That's interesting. So it seems to be like two classes. Like there's sort of the no-brainer, like the standards enforcing parts of the organization would naturally fit into using this tool anyway. But there seems to be some aspirational work too around platform and driving better productivity outcomes and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the security and things like that are kind of the low-hanging fruit for scorecards. Like it's a very clear and you must do this, and then it gets fuzzier when you start talking about what's the best practices, what do we want people to be doing just generally for their development practices or production practices and things like that.
That makes a lot of sense. Any other thoughts on this one before we? Yeah.
I think what we've come to realize is we need to empower the developers to build their own scorecards and not be a blocker. That's been hampering our scalability, right? We know there are a lot of scorecards that would be great to have, but we don't have the time and resources to build each one of them. So trying to build this out in a more self-service, providing a path to contribution so that anybody can come and stand their scorecard is the way we should be going for. So
seems to be a lot of desire for that.
Scorecard marketplace would be really nice.
I've heard of such a thing. Maybe we're working on that. Yeah, I'm looking forward to more discussion about exactly that. So anything else? Any other thoughts on that one? All right. So thinking about where you are right now and thinking about some of that activation to get to some of these more aspirational phases that we're like thinking about, what are some of the challenges that you're experiencing? We've hit on a couple of these already, but maybe dive into a little bit more. Like, are they political challenges? Are they technical challenges? Are they both? What are we kind of running into?
Yeah, I think at least for me at Earnin, I mean, there's always going to be some political challenges that you have to face, and also just trying to change the culture and trying to change the mindset of why we're doing this. We haven't gone into obviously trying to gate deploys, and I don't think we're anywhere near that. But I feel like that'll be a big hurdle too, trying to figure out how to navigate that and what is a proper way to be able to offer some sort of manual override and some sort of gating as well for that, just so there's accountability. But yeah, I think it's mostly just trying to get everyone involved, work with the stakeholders pretty early on in the process, show them how to do scorecarding, what it can do. One thing I've realized, at least, is that you say scorecarding to people and they think that they understand it, but it isn't until you like do a screen share and you dive into like how far a scorecard can actually go in terms of like what you can look at, that they have like that aha moment in their head. So
That's super interesting. So like the depth of metrics that you can look at and the cross-referencing and things. Okay. Yeah.
I just wanted to go after that because I think the accountability thing is really huge for us. I think that a challenge that we face is accountability without blame. Like, how do you hold teams accountable for not causing too many incidents, for following your best practices without making it something like negative that they're maybe going to be scared of or try and like potentially game the metrics or hide issues. And so it's that being really intentional with the way that we communicate to developers about how we're planning to use these and what they're used for. And then the other challenge that we face is a time and prioritization challenge, true for everyone, but we want to make sure that when we're making these scorecards, we are giving teams the documentation and support that they need to be able to improve on the scorecard. And that can be a little bit more challenging and time consuming than just defining the metrics.
Yeah, I think I'd echo the garbage in, garbage out challenge, and I think there's a secondary one that we were very concerned about even as we were starting to design scorecards, which is how do you pull things back out of a scorecard? Scorecards shouldn't only be additive, but over time you're going to realize you're measuring something that doesn't matter, and how do you pull that back out so that the system doesn't fall under its own weight and that kind of stuff. And so I think that was one of the big challenges. I think the other really big fundamental challenge on the same thing of garbage in, garbage out is it's really easy for people to walk into a meeting and say, hey, we're not doing the right thing, right? Why aren't we doing what I said we should do? It's much, much harder to get that person who is very opinionated in a room to sit down and describe the opinion in a measurable fashion. And the cultural shift to the accountability of, yes, I am opinionated, that's awesome, but I'm opinionated with backing data, right? And how other people can understand that. And so that's a journey that Life 360 will be on for a while.
So again, I think going with the theme, data quality and accuracy, that is one of the challenges. It is a constantly changing landscape. So ensuring that the data is consistent and accurate, otherwise the scorecards don't mean anything if we don't have the right data. That becomes challenging. The other thing is integrating with the existing systems. The systems keep changing. We used PagerDuty for our management, then we use Fire Hydrant. So our MTTR values are not in sync anymore. So we gotta keep updating that system. The other thing is change management. People, stakeholders are resistant to change. So communicating at an organizational level and saying, hey, we need to use scorecarding for driving these changes is another challenge. And then I keep saying this is a theme, making it a forcing function. We went in building the internal developer portal and scorecarding, thinking that's the new shiny thing. Everybody is going to love to just use it, but just driving adoption across the team has been a challenge. So just some of those.
Yeah, I think for us, the challenge in maturing our usage of this is figuring out how it's useful for developers and why they should want to use it. So we talk a lot about on platform, like the carrot versus the stick. And at least at Docker, our philosophy is we really do not want to be the group of people who is coming in and telling you you're doing it wrong, or you must do this thing that we say that you must do. We really want it to be, there's something in it for you here. So the hard part is going to be trying to tell people, if you align yourself to these scorecards, what are you actually getting out of it, right? So production readiness, like hopefully what you find is that you're getting paged less, right? Like, great, awesome, cool. For security, like, that's a little harder one. Like, yeah, we don't want to have a security breach, but you must do it. I'm sorry, this is going to have to be a stick thing. So I think really just showing people what they get out of that, and not just being able to measure it and show their manager, but getting developers on board, and it's not something that they dislike, it's something that they actively look forward to as far as, great, thank you for giving this information so I can do better. I can be on call less or something like that.
I love that, we kind of ask about the challenges, but naturally each of you sort of gravitate towards the solutions, which is like, kind of the mindset that I see around productivity stuff. So, okay, fast answer. We like to think of scorecards as having a net positive effect on anything, any initiative that we apply it to, right? And a couple of these have already come up a little bit in terms of standardization, but what has worked really, really well? I mean, like the slam dunk, like 10x type of ROI. And then maybe if you could give a little bit of a view into the future, what do you expect the overall impact of scorecarding to have on the organization? The net effect, a year, 2 years down the road when things, really begin to gel.
I'll start with the easy answer, which is the onboarding scorecard. Just being able to make sure that everyone has all their stuff linked into Cortex is like, just from the service catalog point of view of like, okay, great, we can figure out where everything is now. Wow, we've never been able to do that well before. So that was the easy part. I think what else has worked really well, and I've harped on this several times now, so I'm sorry, but security.
Yeah.
It's a really easy way to define that stuff, and it's very clear cut, and it's worked really well.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about the onboarding scorecard? I'm just sorry, can I ask questions right now?
Oh, please.
I love about the onboarding scorecard?
Yeah, go for it.
I think it's one of the default ones that's in there, right? Someone correct me if I'm wrong. We added some rules to it as well. Like, we took it as a draft and like messed around with it, but like just making sure that you have a GitHub repo linked, that you have a Slack channel linked, that you have your documentation page and Notion linked, and all that other kind of stuff. So at the very least, we know every team at Docker has this stuff documented in a place where every other developer can go into the Cortex UI and just figure out, okay, great, who owns this? Where's their Slack channel? How can I go talk to them about this? Like, it's like base case, I know, but like super helpful.
So actually, interestingly on that, the team at Life 360 that maintains Cortex, we actually took a developer and had them go build tooling for exactly that, for the onboarding, because the adoption side was like, hey, we'll go find your repos. Here's your cortex.yaml file, but we're already going to go walk PagerDuty. We're already going to go walk Datadog. We're going to do all of these things and prep all of that for them to kind of smooth that. It was hundreds of services that we're trying to get onboarded. So yeah, it was on top, not only the scorecard on the end, because was it actually there, but trying to ease the adoption for people as well.
Yeah, we do something similar. I think it's like, it was interesting for us because instead of like, we have a lot of different places that we're trying to pull information from, and this was really what has worked well, is being able to pull information from all of those different sources and combine it into one view that is easy for people to understand. And that's been huge. And I think also what I expect the impact to be in the long run is going to be closer collaboration with the product developers. When we say like, here, we've pulled your Slack channel, we've pulled your repo, we've pulled your PagerDuty teams, we pull your monitors, we can see, you can see all of that here in one place. Now come talk to us. Like, what about this works for you? What about this doesn't work for you? Like, what do you want to see? What can I change here to make this more useful for you? And just opening that dialogue and making it really clear that we're building this for them, I'm hoping that will have a really big impact in bringing us closer together.
Nick, I know you've got an opinion on this when you helped me wordsmith this question. So
Yeah, I think and I don't have my notes because my phone didn't work, so I'm just going based off of what I know. But yeah, like we had an operational maturity scorecard similarly. It's like the onboarding one, but we kind of developed our own with all the metadata and everything that we want to look for during an incident. But yeah, I think like the wins, at least for this, would be, again, like less incidents, like a better quality for our customers, like not having to deal with either error messages or things kind of showing up, and not having to police. I think like SRE at least, or other platform teams have to police a lot of things, and the scorecards in a way is self-policing. You can set it up in a way that it is self-policing at least, and yeah, just kind of have a set it and forget it type of like mentality on it.
it's a little behind the scenes. Several people weighed in on this question because it's super interesting. The idea of just driving the onboarding. We know from our own data that, for instance, like Backstage typically sees about a 10% adoption across full engineering teams. So it's no surprise then that like driving this metric is super important. So
For us, some of the wins have been clear wins. So with the DORA scorecards that we implemented, we now actively have engineering teams looking at deployment frequency and MTTR numbers. So even though we have not gated our deployments based on the deployment frequency or DORA metrics, what we have started doing is implemented alerting to the teams. So if they fall below a certain threshold of the deployment frequency, they get alerted. And again, nobody wants to be on the wall of shame. So that works pretty effectively. That is the clear impact we have seen. The deployment frequency numbers have been great. What do we want the impact to be? We're dealing with a lot of incidents, and having a proper escalation policy set up, having proper ownership set up, having Cortex be the source of truth for all our incidents, and hoping to resolve or hoping to bring down the number of incidents, and just making the process more seamless, at least in the near term. That's what I'm hoping the impact to be.
it's wonderful. Great. Okay, so I think we actually have time for both of these, and so we'll do a 1 minute-ish answer on everybody. But I want to hear right now today, not necessarily the aspirational stuff. Give me your biggest win, even if it's a repeat, that's fine. Just a couple of words. But then also the most unexpected challenge, the thing that you actually didn't see coming with this implementation.
I have to think about this one. I think, at least with scorecards, the biggest win so far has just been getting everyone aligned on the same thing. So like the onboarding scorecard, the security scorecard. I think going back to like the carrot and the stick thing, like we don't have to be the people policing what everyone else does, and we can instead kind of put those standards out there and let people bring themselves to those standards. And so I think that preserving that relationship between the platform and the rest of the engineering teams it really helps with that, I think. Most unexpected challenge, I think. Okay, I'll phrase it this way. There's a lot of data that's in Cortex now because we've integrated all these different things. And then now the question is, how do we pull apart that data and display that data in really useful ways for the business beyond just like the scorecards or the edge intelligence stuff, but figuring out how we want to slice and dice data, because like there truly is, like all those data sources are in there, and that's what makes scorecards and everything else so powerful. But what else can we do with all that data instead of having to these other systems integrate them with GitHub ourselves? Can we pull the GitHub data from Cortex along with all the other context that's in there? So
Good problem to have, at least.
yeah,
Too much visibility.
Yeah, we can do all kinds of things. I just don't know what the best thing to do yet is. So
Our biggest win is yet to come, I think. But we have had a couple of small wins. Like I said, we had DORA scorecards that were great. We have security scorecard in the pipeline, which would work well, service standard scorecard. And then service catalog itself, that has been a game changer in terms of just figuring out ownership and who to reach out to, who's the person responsible for this particular service, or do we have enough metadata, or how do we implement these alerting based on the metadata that exists. So there have been a lot of wins. The biggest win, I would say it's yet to come. In terms of the most unexpected challenge, I think Chris said it. You need to identify the key metrics, and I think that was something that, in hindsight, if I had to go back and change something before implementing, identifying the key metrics that the teams and engineers and organization would care about the most, and then using those key metrics to drive scorecards would have been more useful than us assuming that these are the key metrics that would be helpful. So
It's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we're also on the same journey of like the best win is yet to come. I think I'd mentioned it before, but being able to see like where a scorecard would fall when it comes to like your services and be able to draft something up with, I don't know, like 30 different rules just to see how it would fall in line if you were to apply a scorecard to all of those services has been helpful. What I would probably like maybe like do a little bit differently next time might be engaging with the engineering stakeholders as early on as possible, like not even as early as I wanted to before, but earlier than that. I think getting the adoption by engineering stakeholders earlier and like working on the scorecards earlier would have helped us with our journey and get more kind of buy-in and adoption across it. We did it somewhat early, but I think like in retrospect, even earlier would have been better. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think so. The early win is actually, it was interesting. It was an engagement from the wider engineering org that architectural standards could be measured, which was really to get the opinion out of it and shift that to something that's a little more concrete, a little bit more documentable. So that's it's hard to quantify that, but culturally and some other stuff there, that was a really key shift. In terms of most unexpected challenge, I mentioned this with some of the Cortex team here. I was oddly surprised there was not a Jira integration pre-built when we were onboarding to do services back and forth. I think that has now been
resolved.
released.
Yeah,
but
kind of key.
Yeah, it was like, oh, I didn't realize we had to go run some code for that. So
Thanks for sticking with us.
I think our biggest win, and I know like Brett has mentioned this, and this is maybe kind of a boring one, but it's really with driving security change. We are in this situation where our security team and our infrastructure team are kind of under-resourced this quarter, and we had a really specific vulnerability that we wanted to address as soon as possible, and we didn't have anyone to drive it. And so before Cortex, that just wouldn't have gotten accomplished, but we made it part of a scorecard, and we've been able to drive it in an automated fashion and see huge progress on it, even more so than we saw when we were having that driven by a program manager, and that has just been huge. So biggest win so far.
Did you use initiatives to drive it? Just out of
Mhm.
curiosity? Okay.
Yeah, it's been great. Biggest unexpected challenge for us was trying to decide how specific you want to get in your scorecard. Like scorecards are hugely valuable, and also we don't want to overwhelm our developers. And so from our side, we're like, we want you to follow this best practice. We have like 75 things that are best practice, but that's going to be a little bit overwhelming. How do you narrow that down to the right amount so that you're still getting everything covered that you want covered without making it too much overhead for developers?
And that's interesting too, because the format would allow you to experiment with that a little bit without having to do a heavy. Okay, that's super interesting. All right, so this is our last one, and some of you kind of went in this direction already in the last question, which is great. We're driving for solutions, but the pithy bit of wisdom that you could leave the audience with as they're sort of starting on this, as thought leaders, one thing you'd share with the audience, one thing you wish you'd known that could help the audience kind of accelerate their own efforts. Then we'll get into some audience questions.
I'm going to break the rules and say two things. Sorry. I think echoing what other people said, engaging with leadership early, I did that very intentionally and got like our head of engineering on board while we were still just in talks with Cortex. And that was really worth it. And I think has definitely led to the success of our rollout because it's been good to have that top down, like not necessarily with a stick, but like we as an engineering team are doing this, get excited about it. And then also just being really, really, really intentional and making sure that you're truly in alignment. You know, people say scorecards, they mean different things. Be really explicit about what that means for you and your company.
I would look at this and realize that this is not that this is a technical solution for a people problem. And understanding your organizational context and why this is worthwhile to the overall organization is the only way you can be successful. You know, as you were just talking about, like talking with your leadership, hey, does this match the organizational intent and the organizational drive that we're trying to do? Make sure you've got alignment on that. You've got a shot. Otherwise, it's going to be rough.
Yeah, and I already touched on this, but yeah, I'm still going to go with like just engaging any stakeholders, not just leadership, but stakeholders in general, engineering managers, things like that, early on in the process, and go into detail of what a scorecard is and what it can do pretty early on, so that they can start thinking about like when they go to create the scorecard, what they're going to want out of it. So
That's great advice. Yeah.
I'm going to do the same thing Victoria did, say two things instead of one. First one is exactly the same thing that Nick just said, engaging with stakeholders early on. The second thing is understanding your data sources and reliability of the data collection methods early on, making sure that data you're using is accurate, otherwise does not make any sense. So
Garbage in, garbage out again. So.
Yeah, I'm going to come at this from the developer experience and platform side of things, which is you should go into this knowing what this is going to do for your developers. So there are lots of reasons that this is useful for the business, for leadership, for management, but ultimately adoption is based on how the developers use this, unless you're going to go around and hit people over the head and say you must. So figure out what you're doing for your developers here, what this is giving them, whether that's production standards like we talked about, like if you do these, hopefully you'll get paid less, or other things like that. Understand what the benefit is to them, because ultimately that's, I think engineering managers know that dollars get spent based on what's best for the developers, right, and not just for the business. So.
Some great answers. So, audience questions. Anything? What's on your mind? Anything to ask the panelists before we? Or are we all just thinking food and drinks right now? Yeah, sure.
Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh Jaladi. I work as a site reliability engineer for Foot Locker. So I've been working on a couple of products like Spotify Backstage, and recently Red Hat also launched IDP, Internal Developer Platform. So I've been working on that. So what problem we are trying to solve? Let's say per discussion, if we want to onboard a set of engineers, let's say it's a application, simple application, but I have iOS side of it and also Android side of it. So we want to give a golden path for the developers. So it's a lot of discussion, right? So, but like, let's say if I opt in for Cortex, Cortex is going to give a head start for that golden path, or it is something that should be discussed within the team. Understand the business use case are different, but like let's say we start from a basic start, we do not have any knowledge on it. So is Cortex going to provide a head start for us? So that's what I'm trying to get at. So that golden path, how do we construct that golden path for developers?
I could speak a little bit about like our journey, which started with Backstage. We were in Backstage for a year. We had people developing plugin or a team developing plugins for it. We had monitoring, like, you name it. We had our own kind of homegrown scorecard built into Backstage. The problem I think for us was the development time that it required to keep iterating on new features in Backstage, new plugins, and then being able to police things throughout the engineering org for like making sure your Backstage stuff is updated, which is harder in Backstage than it is in Cortex, because Cortex shows you like when things were last updated. You can go to the repo for the catalog file in Backstage, but it's a lot of work to kind of do that. So like for us, it was like trying to like onboard to those integrations and stuff that we were manually trying to code for within Backstage, but go with a provider that already has those integrations that we could, as you said, like quickly interject and like have a path forward. Like basically, yeah.
Get started within like 2 3 days. Let's say our goal is to get him going on the very first day, but like to start with, so it's a 2 3 days. So, but like having everyone come to an agreement to a golden path is it's like a political decision when end of the day. So that's what trying to understand how we, if there is an industry standard boilerplate, let's say this is the golden path for mobile application per se Android, at least the team can start looking at that standard or boilerplate and iterate over. So I was thinking like, is there something that Cortex offer in that particular area?
So this is back to the organizational context there. If your organization doesn't know what your golden path is, Cortex or frankly any other tool isn't going to help, right? If, on the other hand, you are, hey, we think we know generally what this is, and we need a place to surface that, to test it in front of the engineers, to have people interact with it. Cortex is a pretty good platform for that with the pre-built plugins and other stuff. But garbage in, garbage out is super appropriate here, right? If you are not opinionated about your intent of what it means to be on that golden path, it is very, very difficult to build a scorecard that measures if you're on that path.
Yeah, just to follow up on that as well. Like you said, if you don't know what your golden paths are, like nothing can help you except for sitting down and trying to figure that out. But Cortex can definitely help you with driving adoption and also with what is crucial to golden paths, getting community feedback. That community feedback loop is hugely crucial. And so getting those golden paths in front of developers, having them try that out and then giving you that feedback, having a place where they can easily see where they're at and then give that feedback to you really, really speeds up that process.
So the question I have is, I'll provide the context first. So developers usually have a multitude of signals that they get saying that your code has low unit tests, your code is not coded, like you're not coding well, this and that and the other. So most of the times the developers already know their code is either not good or shit or it's amazing or whatever, right? Is this yet another way to just tell them, hey, what you're doing is not good enough, and does it increase the cognitive load on them? How does it decrease it? That's the question.
So that's actually a fundamental challenge of what we were trying to solve. So sorry, jumped in here. I'll hand it off to her. But so the core of how we started to put scorecards together was that there do not pass go type things that you're failing on, and there are other things that are just informative. And that information asymmetry that I mentioned before was huge, because if I know this piece, Victoria's on an engineering team, and she doesn't know that there's some other thing lurking there. And it's not that, you might not know to go look, but it's not in front of you. And so surfacing all of that in front of them was directly to address the cognitive load. Don't go chase the security team. Don't go chase the SRE team the team. That was our primary feedback, right, as we were trying to push this out.
So very direct use case of this was the Flakes scorecard that I was talking about earlier, right? We, as the DevX team who owns the CI platform, we don't own the tests. We don't own the tests that are written. But every time CI fails, we are the first line of defense. Hey, CI is crap, or it fails, or it's taking too long, right? But and it's a lot of burden to address when you don't own the tests that are failing or flaking, right? Having a flake scorecard helped us identify, hey, these are the tests that are flaking most. who are the owners for these particular tests and who are the people you should be reaching out to, right? And if you take a step higher up than that, it basically helps you identify the gaps in all the processes, right? It's not it's not a blame game, it's not, but it's helping you figure out where are the gaps in all the processes put together. So I think that has been a biggest area of impact for us, where we have a platform where we can surface and identify the improvements that we can make based on the gaps that we're seeing.
Test flakiness is usually outside of the code anyway, right? I mean, typically. So.
The one thing I'll add there, you said the developers already know their code is crap and that piling on isn't going to help. That's true. But one of the traditional problems you find with engineers is like they know that there's tech debt. They keep yelling that there's tech debt. No one will find the time for them to fix it. So, right, the benefit to these developers of something like a scorecard for this is being able to show leadership. Like, here's an actual number, right? Like, here's the comparison to other teams, or here's across the org, every team struggles with this, and we need to invest on the platform side of things. So I think, if anything, they should think of it as air cover for themselves politically or wherever organizationally, as like this is a number that says it's a problem, and it's not just me whining.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Brett just said, and I just want to say also, like, it's all about prioritization, and it's like talking about reducing cognitive load. When developers go see this laundry list of all the things that we want them to follow, that's a lot of cognitive load. But when you can say, like, if you're meeting bronze level, that means you're doing what's necessary to be running, and we're okay with that. And like that does a lot. And then also definitely being able to tell leadership, being able to tell product, like, yeah, doing the comparison is hugely valuable. Say, like, look, compared to us, our service compared to these other teams, we're not meeting the same standards. We need more resourcing. We need to push out, our product delivery roadmap so that we can avoid having these incidents in the future, because we've seen patterns like that in the past. So it's a huge tool for the developers to do that.
Can you speak a little bit more about that specific thing you said, which is the product side of things, like translating this into something that product can absorb and actually internalize?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest example of this is really incidents, and it's like the product teams want to deliver for the product roadmap as quickly as possible, understandably so. What they don't necessarily internalize is that by putting off that tech debt, they're actually making it so that they can't deliver as quickly as they want to. Like, if anyone sees Red Accelerate, if you want to deliver quickly, you have to deliver with quality. And to be able to show that to product managers, so we've actually gone through the process of like quantifying how much time do engineers spend on incidents. It's a lot. And so if I can say, like, up front, here's the cost of you not doing this work, here you are low on this level, you are going to suffer this consequence. But if you say, I'm going to push out my product delivery by 3 weeks, I'm going to focus on cleaning up these things that are on this scorecard, then you can be sure that you won't have those incidents in the future.
One quick one on that one as well. So we touched on here a little bit of scorecards as a way to do, like, are you passing, are you failing? And that has some justifiable angst that goes with it. I think several of us were talking beforehand, like, none of us, I think, look at it that way. This is your path to success, right? This is so you don't have to go figure out, should I be doing X? Should I be doing Y? If you follow the checklist, there you go, and you'll be good. And that can change it, culturally from oh my God, I'm failing because they're putting these scorecards on me, and like one more thing to, oh, hey, that thank you, I know what I'm doing now, cool, we'll get that in the tickets for the 4 things that we're not doing, right?
I hope not. So my question is, like, we use different technologies. So we are also serverless. We are also in Kubernetes. Does that make a contributing factor to the metrics that you define for a scorecard? And if so, how?
So I'll answer that really quickly from our side. We, at the Life 360 side, we're expecting somewhere between 40 and 50 scorecards. And it was every architectural team was going to write their standard and scorecard format. So if you are on the cloud side, you're going to write scorecards differently to handle those different cases of technology. So yeah, absolutely, and it all over the place.
Yeah, same with us. We have serverless, we have Kubernetes, we have things running on bare metal. Like, it's all very different. And so that the way that we thought about it is, like, for these scorecards, you think about your total addressable market. And so it's like you have a scorecard that's related to serverless. It's only the serverless things that are running that are going to be applicable to that. Does that mean that if you have a very widespread system and you do things a lot of different ways, you'll need a lot of scorecards? Yes. It also makes it very clear that you maybe should think about standardizing, because you can save time and developer overhead by reducing the number of different things that you're doing.
That's actually a really good question. So that's one of the things we've been grappling with is Docker has a lot of different very different things, which is like we have our cloud services, we've got Docker Desktop, which runs on Mac OS and Windows, we've got open source stuff, and they all work in very different ways, and the projects have very different standards. And so that's one of the areas that I think is a area of growth for us, is like this is being pushed from platform, which mostly focuses on cloud. And so we've mostly been building scorecards based around production readiness and standards and like that. And we don't have a lot of experience with like, what does it mean to have a good Windows application? So I think that's an area of growth for us, that we can work with those teams to figure that out.
I'm really curious about what that was like behind the scenes, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like with the concept of deployments in Cortex, what does it mean to deploy a binary application for your laptop? Are we just going to count the once a month release we do, or should we count every time they merge? Like the concepts don't always like translate exactly. So like, we've been trying to deal with that part of it and like expand outwards from just cloud.
I think we probably have, are there any other thoughts on this one? We got room probably for one more. And don't forget, your panelists are going to be networking and hanging out too, so you get a chance to pick their brains a little bit further. But we probably have room for one more. Oh, yeah. Sorry, his hand went up first. He just beat you.
Hopefully this is kind of a fun one for the last question, but as soon as you measure something, almost immediately people find a way of gaming it. So for some of these scorecards, what's one thing people did that you didn't want them to do?
I can answer this one. I actually will say we suffered from this in the past when we first rolled out Dora metrics for teams, and they immediately started gamifying them. And that comes back to me to the intentionality and the communication about it. Like if you don't tell the story, people are going to make up their own stories and believe that instead. And so it's like consistent, align on what it means for you to bring out these scorecards and really make that messaging very consistent and focus on it being a positive thing and not a blame thing for the teams. Because if they don't feel like they're going to be punished, penalized in any way for not meeting these standards, they don't feel that incentive to gamify them. And not gamify, but like to game the system. So that's, avoid that as much as possible by being intentional and having it as a carrot, not a stick.
Goodhart's Law.
Yeah, I think you have to be careful when you measure things like that and try to give people, like, especially if it's a number-based thing, right? Like number of deployments or something like Dora metrics. And what we found too is that it's kind of hard because we have a lot of, Docker Hub is comprised of like 70 different microservices. And like a lot of those are not in active development. They work fine. We don't touch them that often. It's cool. So is it right of us to have a scorecard that says we want you deploying at least twice a week? Like, not in this scenario, right? So we've been trying to be very careful about the things that we do include in scorecards to make sure it's applicable to a broad set, or at least the set of applications that we're applying it to. And so I was actually talking to Chris about this and trying to like have more scorecards that are more tuned to smaller groups of applications and things like that. Probably an area for us to grow.
Tags are your friends.
And I think it was a tie, so we'll we'll close out with one more.
Thank you. So, what if the teams operate in a pod-based structure, wherein there are team members from different product design, product engineering? Do you what should be an ideal team size to create a scorecard in a pod-based structure? That's my one question. And the second one is, as I think piggyback on the other question, that in the world of Datadog, where is a lot of monitoring and anomaly detection, the world of Slack integration, you can just ping a Slack alert and then everything is there. And also in the world of right now in business intelligence, wherein all the data can be shown in a dashboard with proper colors, coding, everything. Do you think is that not enough? Do we still need a scorecard because there are signals everywhere? And then the question is, data being a first-class citizen in most of the companies, you wouldn't get a question from the management, whether it's a CEO, that why don't you guys build a dashboard to monitor your metrics? Why do you need another tool to build a scorecard? Because in my experience, traditionally when engineering teams have taken to tools which are either to increase their productivity or to increase their relevance to the overall company strategy or something, it has always been the bottom pyramid, because product is what shines. And if you're not on that team, I mean, that's where so that is the counter question that might get asked. So has anyone faced that issue when bringing scorecards in your companies, or was it mostly within engineering and your CEO did not even know about it? I mean,
I'm holding the mic, so I'll answer first. I think for us, it's almost entirely an engineering-based thing. It's really an internal thing. There are things like Dora metrics that we might report upwards, where it's applicable to business outcomes and things like that. But I think mostly this is a tool for developers and engineering managers to make sure that their teams are successful, right? I think, yeah, we aren't really tying it to business level metrics. It's really more about how we function as an engineering org, for better or worse.
So exactly the same answer. For us also, it's an engineering-based tool. However, now we are seeing product teams being interested in looking at some of these scorecards and metrics that we are surfacing here. Like you mentioned just now, that these numbers, DORA metrics, are probably getting sent over at a higher level, which is what we do. The CEO is not coming at the Cortex or at the developer portal and looking at it. But yes, this has been only for driving change and adoption within engineering for the most part for us.
Yeah, and I guess I could add in, like, with monitoring and dashboard, you don't see like an overtime type of like graduation or trend or how well your service is doing. With the scorecards. Once you set the scorecard, you can kind of see how services are kind of leveling up to those scorecards, how they are reaching each milestone of bronze, silver, gold. I think that's helpful. Like, one thing that we kind of dove into scorecards for, one use case was we had some incidents where EKS services were going out and the min and max replicas were the same, causing it to eventually just fall over. So we wanted to, there was an issue in the template, we wanted to account for. We had the EKS integration with Cortex enabled, so we were able to build a scorecard off of the replica counts and actually see what's out there in the wild. So that's cool.
Yeah, and I think fundamentally the developer portal should be there to help your engineers be productive. And back to that organizational context, why are you bothering to do it in the first place? If you can't describe that, it's going to be a tough road to go down. But once it's there to help the engineers, all sorts of magic can start happening, behind that. But really come from it in that sense. I think it,
Just what happens is like the business team, they're like, you already have a 3-5 million cloud budget plus one, whatever you say. And,
Yeah.
and then you have so many tools and you want another tool. Like, what is that going to bring? Can I use it for my business strategy?
Yeah, so I think that's where. So the magic isn't actually in knowing what to do, right? You can look across a lot of different technical domains. Hey, you should maintain your tech debt. You should, do your FinOps stuff. You should do all this other kind of stuff. Magic is actually being able to consistently apply that in a consumable manner everywhere. And that's the tooling helps that consistency and it helps the overhead. So I'll use a Live 360 example. Right, we started our FinOps journey, and we'd have companies come in and we're like, yeah, we did your top 6 or 7 things. Okay, like I'm not going to pay you a lot of money for the hard stuff at the bottom of the list. Then fast forward, and we're like, all those things that we thought were done, they weren't done. They were done across 60, 70% of the org. And we doubled our cost savings by just getting it consistently applied everywhere. And that's the magic in it, right? The magic isn't in being able to say, hey, you should have more unit tests. The magic is being able to say, I can show quickly and easily across any section of our code what the unit tests are. And now if we have an area, and Victoria's talking about, like, hey, we're having some incidents. I think it was you talking about, sorry. Like, what's the unit test coverage there? Is that actually an indicator that matters for our org? Okay, if so, cool. We're gonna have that discussion as a team, and we're gonna say, hey guys, we can show a tie-in between this signal and that outcome. And because at the end of the day, like, there's really only a couple of metrics that matter for companies. What's your revenue? Right? And do your customers like you? Right? And so tying this stuff back into those, it's about a step, maybe 2 steps removed, but it can be done.
I'm really excited to answer this one because I think my CEO might be a lot more involved than you guys is. I definitely had to talk directly with my CEO in order to get Cortex approved. And so what I would say is, going back to what you brought up, like, data is everywhere. We have so much data, but there's a difference between data and signal. And there's a lot of data that is just noise. And I think developers and everyone in the company have a hard time cutting through all of that data and knowing what is the most integral, what are those indicators like you were talking about. And that was the selling point that was allowed me to get Cortex budget approved, is saying like, look, we have all these different places where we have this really valuable data. We are not using that to our advantage right now. We can do better for our engineers, for our company, for our customers by finding the signal in that noise, and this tool will help us get there.
I want you to take that mic and just drop it. That was brilliant. So, how about a round of applause for this panel? How were they fantastic? I knew they would be. All right, thanks everybody.